So you're from Belgium
Yes,
originally.
yeah.
So what was your sort of childhood like? What was your background?
Oh dear. Well, I grew up in a family of four.
Yeah,
I have two sisters and one brother.
yeah,
I am the middle one.
yeah,
We two children died after birth, so we would have been six actually. And my parents were war children who suffered through the war, and my mum, for instance, had to stop her studies at age 14, start working, as a couturier and all that. And
yeah.
my father became a postman.
Really?
Yeah, and my father was of a family of 12,
Mm.
my mother of 7. And strangely enough, my father and his family has nobody who paints.
Mm.
And he started picking up the brushes and the pencils and did a course sort of by correspondence.
Yeah.
And as far as I recall, I've always seen him in the beginning, though. I mean, say the early 60s, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, reproducing the masters like Rubens or Van Dyck.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he collected heaps and heaps of material because he worked in Brussels and he couldn't let go of bringing magazines from the streets that people threw in the bin.
Yeah.
And he would cut out anything that would inspire him in paint. So
Yeah.
I saw him doing that for a long time until he started doing his own works, going really alive and painting landscapes and still lives and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But he said that when I was 3 years old, I saw him drawing. I mean, we all looked at him drawing around the table in the winter times. I imagine it was like when you nothing else to do. And he said that I demanded a pencil. I was only 3, he said, and he gave me a tiny stump of something he left like that would suit him, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I said, no, I want a big one like you.
Yeah.
And so from there on, sort of at 9, he sort of coaxed me, or was it encouragement? Did I already show an interest? I don't remember anymore. But he
Yeah.
coaxed me and my sister, to go with him every Sunday for 4 years long to the Fine Arts Academy
Yeah.
in the city where I was born.
Oh, thank you very much.
And basically, then I recall that when I was 13, I was the only and youngest participant in a live art fair where I started making portraits of the adult artists. And for me, it was like, wow, that's the thing to do. I never realized that I was the youngest, or that
Yeah.
and people looked, oh God, I can do that. And,
Yeah.
I did try to be realistic.
Yeah.
Mm,
Thank you.
yeah.
So you were exposed to art then from quite a very young
Yeah,
age.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
you didn't sort of realise that you'd got a talent at that point.
No, but you know what it was? When I was quite intimidated in school as a child because of all the bright heads who knew anything about math, and I thought I was dumb,
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the feeling they give you at school. I
Yeah.
mean, there's only appreciation for people who use their brains for math, or you're
Yeah.
good in sports, and I was good at neither.
Mm.
And it was like, I got friends, and I got my mates flocking to me when it was creative expression, and they always asked me to do their drawings, and they would help me with math.
Yeah.
It was a time where I realized that I could do something
Yeah.
that was mine. And I remember once we were out on an excursion. I think that was primary, elementary school. I must have been 7, 8, and we sat by a small river or a brook or something, and we had to draw it. We didn't have to draw it, but we could make up any fantasy. But I started straight away drawing that with markers, and I tried to be so precise. I also had a love for English. I just adored English.
Yeah.
And so I remember I called my boat, I painted a boat, and I wanted it to sound English, so I called it the Buttermain. But that was where I remember saying to my friends, because they said, oh, well, you can draw very well. And I said, yeah, when I grow up, I want to work for Walt Disney.
Excellent.
So at 7, I precisely knew that I had talent. Then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Excellent. So then you went through school. What
Yeah.
did you sort of know then when you left school? This, you were gonna.
I must say I've had a love and hate relationship with painting and drawing because I moved through a very difficult childhood.
Yeah.
There was domestic violence. There was we were quite a dysfunctional family
Yeah.
to begin with. So basically, I think that art sort of saved me from getting sucked up in the turmoil of problems and sort of my fantasy, my escapism was
Yeah.
I devoured comic books. I mean, Belgium is the country for comics, and so I was absorbed by comics that went back to the Greek and the Roman ancient times, and they were the figures that I started copying.
Yeah.
Not with carbon paper, but actually copying. And I remember that my first copies I made when I was 5 or 6 was probably Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and Goofy.
Yeah.
But my brother, for instance, he couldn't do that. He tried, and he always used carbon paper. And I know that my father sort of scoffed at him like, you can do it, but he will never be an artist.
Yeah.
My sister went into calligraphy and then stopped it when she became a pediatrician. But now she's back into painting. She's getting good at it again.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of an escapism for you then, is it?
It is,
as a
yeah.
youngster?
I struggled at first with technical problems. I just hated going through the formal academic things like, learn how to shade and grade and all that. And, I mean, at 9 years old, 10 years old, you have to sit for 3-4 hours sketching and painting stones or matchboxes on the table. And it's like, it's boring. It's absolutely boring.
Yeah.
But we always arrived half an hour too early before the school opened up, the academy opened up its doors. Because we went on a bicycle, winter and summer.
Yeah.
And it was quite hilly, Flanders. I hated that. And also I thought, here's my Sunday. And in those days we even had Wednesday afternoon classes. So I was like, I have no time to play. I can never play.
Yeah.
But when we arrived, there was a whole range of plaster copies of Venus of Milo, Aphrodite, and so on that were standing in the corridor. It was a wooden floor. It just, and I stood there alone as a 9-year-old looking at all these nude statues, and I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
I love this. I would like to make that because it sort of matched my adoration for the ancient Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Where we had all these heroes and beautiful feathers and plumes on their helmets and all of that.
Yeah.
And my mother was into it as well. So I used to say to my mum, when I grow up, I'll buy a chariot and then we'll just with the horses and go from city to city. Yeah, I adore my mother. And, yeah.
Is she still in Belgium? Is she?
Yes. My father passed away last year, and my mum is since 2001 in a nursing home. She had an aneurysm, so she can't live on her own anymore. So when I'm here, I call her every week, or at least when I can, once or twice a year, I'm going to visit her.
Yeah. So are you settled here now then, George?
It's my base. It's my base, but I continue to travel.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I can't stop traveling. It's like, for me, it's like breathing. I have to do it.
Yeah. So when you sort of left school, what did you, where did you go from there? What?
You mean in terms of studies or activities?
Both. I mean, what did you?
Well, I won the second prize in a contest for designing a poster for the 50th anniversary of a very famous international publicity agency called Lintes. Lintes were, and that gave me a 6-month sort of apprenticeship at their agency.
Right.
It started with a fortnight that I was allowed, because that was the prize, and then I just got out of school in Brussels, and I decided, I wanted to travel, so I started hitchhiking through Spain all the way to Morocco.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't know any Spanish.
Yeah.
I only knew French. and I sort of twisted my Spanish into French,
Yeah.
and people encouraged me, and then finally at age, that age I was 21, I picked up my pencils and I wanted to try and see if I could do portraits of tourists, and so I started in Murcia, which is Andalusia, I believe, and from there I went. People liked it and I liked it, and I went on to the big spot like Benidorm and Torremolinos,
Yeah.
where I spent like 3 or 4 weeks doing nothing but portraits.
Yeah.
Met loads of people who invited me to Sweden, where again I did portraits and landscapes and so on. But Spain was, for me, the opening. The gates were open to, wow, there is more than just Belgium. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I've always felt like I wasn't a Belgian anyway, so I've always felt that this is a village, but what I have to live here is not me, and I felt a very close kinship to the Native Americans, and I wanted to be an Indian. I did everything to be an Indian.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I played in the woods nearby with my friends. I designed my own bracelets out of the fabric throwaways from my mother.
Yeah.
Cut them out, made loincloths, made headbands, and
Yeah.
painted myself with markers.
Yeah.
When I was alone in my room, I locked myself up and I would
Yeah.
paint myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Spain really sort of boosted my self confidence,
Yeah.
and it was near October when finally the season was getting, was to finish
Yeah.
for portrait artists. So they said, oh, you could go to Canary Islands, or
Yeah.
in November that picks up there. Lots
Yeah.
of Swedes and Norwegians and so on. But I was running out of money, and so I decided to go to Morocco. That was another adventure for me. That was
Yeah.
like, Morocco, what is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there, I got arrested.
Really?
Yeah, I was put in custody for 7 hours in Casablanca because I didn't know that I needed a permit to work,
Yeah.
and I just thought I do just like in Spain actually.
Yeah.
And even in Spain it was illegal because I didn't have a work permit either, but I got away with it. But Morocco was like, ooh. I was deported from Morocco, and it was said that I couldn't come back to Morocco for 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, so. And I was like, and nobody would believe me. Say, oh, surely you've done some drugs or something. No, really. I just, the police was after me, like, what are you doing? And I just realized, oh my God, it's got to do with the drawing. And I sort of quickly threw away my price tag on my plywood where I was, sketching. But that was like, it was for me the biggest shock in my life of clash culture.
Yeah.
But it enticed me to visit again later,
Yeah.
after I've been another 2 times to Morocco, once as a tour leader and once again on my own, just traveling through the country,
Yeah.
and it opened up a lot for me. But so Morocco was basically the first overseas trip that sort of inspired me. What I felt was the exoticness I was looking for in my youth, the not boring, exciting, new things, different world. People dressed differently, spoke differently. You had the sense of the spices, and it was marvelous.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the thing that
Yeah.
sort of inspired you
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah. Did that inspire your art as well? Sort of being there, did it?
Not straight away, because I was still. I mean, most of the time I was still doing things that call what we call maybe realistic art. I don't know. I was just doing landscapes as a student, and I did not quite know what I wanted to tell, what I wanted to say, and
Yeah.
how to express it.
Yeah.
What style? I think the style was important then. But I knew that I was very narrative. I always wanted to tell stories, and
Yeah.
so it was only about, say, around 87, 88 that I started doing works which had to do. I remember participating in an anti-apartheid rally, and then he did works for the poster, then he works to put on the demonstration boards and all that.
Yeah.
And from there onwards, and I participated quite in a few other contests, like Olivier Strelly Award, which was a fashion designer, and I got an award in that for comics and for painting, because I was basically, before I started painting, very much interested in becoming a comic artist.
Yeah.
And my first comic art that I made was when I was 15, and there were 8 pages in pencil, which I have thrown away a couple of years ago. But they were again a utopian kind of story. I wanted the people to live together in peace, and I drew up something like pre-Avatar. You know, I had Samoans, I had Native Americans, I had somebody coming from outer space, and I even designed a spaceship and all of that. A blonde guy in a sort of Star Trek suit,
Yeah.
and he was going to make peace and rally the world to live together in harmony.
Yeah.
You know. But my father, again, he was in that sense a bit discouraging and negative, and that's what I sort of reproached to him. You know, sort of when he saw me drawing that, he says, "Oh, you will never finish that story," and I never did.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of like, yeah, this will not get finished.
Mm.
But I persisted, because later on I did another one. I did sort of only 2 or 3 pages instead of straight away going for a long story. And publishers told me, well, it's not perfect yet, but don't give up, just continue. And you get the sort of standard answers, because most publishers in those days, they wouldn't take risks anymore with new comic artists, because it was too much money. And so I gave up on that, did a few political cartoons, which I gained prizes with in international contests and all that. And then finally I thought, no, I gotta paint. Paint is, I don't depend on a publisher, I do depend on galleries maybe, but from there on I moved into a movement that was a sort of anarchist kind of art movement that only lasted 2 years. It was called Salon de Refusés. Don't know if you know that.
Salon de Refusés?
Yes, which is a term that was coined by Napoleon III in France in the 19th century, to which belonged, for instance, Monet and Delacroix, because they were not accepted in any of the other salons, because they weren't painting Impressionism or whatever, so they were kind of rebels. And one guy from Brussels founded this organization without any profit, association with that name, and I was the vice president of it for the second year, and we had hundreds of artists, and we decided to allow anybody in, Sunday artists, Sunday painters, amateurs, professionals, side by side, and let the public decide who's a professional, and, you know. And that, of course, was like kicking against the shin bones of the gallery owners, you know, just breaking up their market. And said sorry, because actually some of them participated in it for the sheer sake of protesting against the gallery circuit, which was in our eyes too elitist and gave very little scope or possibilities for people who just came from school to go out there and have an exhibition. It was always, do you have collectors? Have you got exhibitions before? So you were always was always a no-no, basically. And so we found we had to do something as a contra-current against the establishment.